Alrighty, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about some of the other common jQuery methods that we'll want to use. So here are the 7 methods that I want to discuss. And the way that I'm going to do this here is I'll make an HTML file, which I already have. I called it methods.html, and then I'll add in my basic HTML, and I'll just call it jQuery methods in the title. And I'm going to just steal the CDN script that I added from the last exercise, just so I don't have to go through that whole process. So I'll just use the CDN, and then I'm going to add some HTML here that we're going to work with. And I'm going to use this HTML to demonstrate how all of these methods work. And as always, I encourage you to follow along. So the first thing that I'm going to do is add some HTML in. I'll have an H1, and it will just say jQuery methods demo page. And then we'll add in a text input. Input type equals text. And we'll give it a placeholder that just says your name. Just like that. Make this a little bit bigger. And then we'll add in a UL again with some LIs. And these LIs will be different types of candy. So we'll have Skittles and Starburst and Twix. Okay, so 3 types of candies instead of LIs, instead of a single UL. And we'll just start with this, and let's open it up in the browser. See what we're working with. All right, and we'll open up the console to double check that we have jQuery. So there's a lot of ways we can do that. We can type jQuery, we can do $ and select H1, and make sure we get the right H1, which we do. So now we know that jQuery is correctly added to our page. All right, so the first method that I want to talk about is called text. I'm going to go to the jQuery documentation and show you how you can find specific methods. So what I like to do is just go to the API documentation homepage, and this actually contains every single method here. So we're looking for text. I would usually do a Command F just to search the page for text. Just want to show you how many there are. And as you can see, there's quite a few. And we'll get to text down here, right here, text, and we'll open that up. And what it tells us is that it gets the combined text contents of each element in the set of matched elements, including their descendants, or we can use it to set the text content of the matched elements. Think of it as the jQuery version of text content. So the jQuery docs always have good examples. You can see here they have some HTML set up, and they're selecting the div with the class of demo container, which is this div, and running .text on it, and they say that it would produce this result here. So all the text, demonstration box, list item 1, list item 2. It works just like text content in vanilla.js. So I'll demonstrate that. Let's zoom in a little bit, and we can do something like $h1.text, and that just tells us the text of the H1 is jQuery methods demo page. I could do the same thing by selecting the UL .text, and that gives me all of the text content inside of the UL. So it strips out all the HTML elements and only gives me the text. Another thing we could do is try to do it on LI. So I'm going to select all the LIs, and remember that will give me a list of 3 LIs, and then I'll run .text on that. What this will do is give me all of the text for all the LIs, and it will return 1 string. The other thing we can do with text that will make it really useful is we can pass in a value, and that value will actually update what the text is. So I can do something like h1.text and change it to new text with some exclamation points, and I hit enter, and that changes the H1 that was selected so that its text content is new text. So now if I ran h1.text with no argument, it tells me it's now new text. And what's really cool about jQuery, as we saw with CSS, is we can apply something to a collection and we don't have to loop through manually. So if I wanted to get all of the LI's text and change it to the string Rusty Colt's dog is adorable, which is true, and I hit enter, this will change all 3 LI's text to be Rusty Colt's dog is adorable. So that's definitely really useful. What we would have to do with vanilla.js is select all 3 LIs, loop through with a for loop, and for each one, set the text content to be Rusty Colt's dog is adorable. All right, so that's the text method. The next one I want to talk about is HTML. So you can probably gather that HTML works just like inner HTML, and I'll just do a search on here for HTML. There it is. And read it here. It says that it gets the HTML contents of the first element in the set of matched elements, or set the HTML contents of every matched element. So let's go back to our code here, and I'm going to refresh. So we reset our code, and I'm going to ask for the HTML of this UL. So I select UL dot HTML, and that will just retrieve the inner HTML of the UL. So the text method corresponds to the text content property, and HTML corresponds to inner HTML. Just like before, I can actually provide an argument to .html, and that will update the HTML content. So I'll update the HTML of the UL to be a new li inside of there that says, I hacked your UL, just like that. And let's do 2 LIs. So I'm going to duplicate this and paste that back. And this other li will say, Rusty is still adorable. So we have 1 li, 2 LIs inside of a string, and we're updating the UL. I hit enter, and you can see that it updates the inner HTML. And if we had multiple ULs on this page, it would update both of them. So for instance, if I select both LIs with $li, and I change the HTML to be an anchor tag, and just like that, anchor tag, and we'll have href equals google.com, and then click me to go to Google. We're updating the HTML content inside of this, and if I hit enter, you can see that it updates both LIs to now reflect that new content. One quick side note, you might think that we could use text to do the same thing, but we actually can't. And that's because text is considered HTML safe, which means that it's not going to treat what you pass it as HTML. It's going to treat it as text. So I'll show you what I mean. If I try and change the text of both LIs to be this, what it will actually do is just give me the text. So it won't treat it like HTML, which is a good thing actually. If we wanted a user to type something into this text box, and when he or she hit enter, we wanted to add a new li with whatever I typed here, a user could potentially write their own HTML here and mess up our site. Or even worse, he or she could write some JavaScript and run that. So if we're letting our user type something in, we don't want to just treat it as HTML, we usually want to treat it as text.